trial just on site alone. Basically, they can just challenge a certain number of times, and just kick people off the jury. And it's pretty obvious to me, anyhow, based on what I've read, that the defense for Mr. Stanley did this on the basis of any juror that looked native, which means that perhaps justice wasn't done. The other thing that seems pretty obvious to me on this whole thing is that the defense wasn't particularly good, from what I read. They were arguing that, okay, so the argument was basically, if you don't know the story, Colton Bushey and his friends are driving onto this property, and like, cards on the table, to be perfectly frank, there's a bit of a history with most of the kids that are in that car of being, less than upstanding citizens. They sort of, most of them have had records, and they go on to Stanley's farm. Apparently they're intoxicated, and they're in a truck, and Stanley walks out with a gun in his hand, and fires it, but it doesn't fire. And apparently, some 40 or 50 seconds later, it then does what's called a hang fire. Now, and anyhow, this was the argument that he didn't intend to shoot Bushey, and he didn't act incorrectly, because it wasn't supposedly loaded, except for this one round in the chamber that went off a ridiculous amount of time later. From what I've read, that that hang fire phenomenon is incredibly rare, and it'd be even more rare for it to go any more than a couple of seconds afterwards. So I don't know. That just it sounds dubious to me, and honestly, I think that perhaps there needs to be an honest to God look into what actually occurred, with maybe an appeal on the trial, because it seems, on the balance of probabilities, it seems like that being something that would have happened. It doesn't seem like a reasonable scenario for me to doubt that happened. It just doesn't seem that was barely a sentence at all. Try it again. It just does not seem reasonable that it was a hang fire of that length of time. On the balance of probabilities, it seems like yes, it's possible, but it's incredibly improbable, and probably didn't happen. Of course, in the federal, or rather in the criminal realm, you're looking at beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't think that the doubt there is reasonable. I don't think that it's reasonable to believe that it was just a misfire, an accident, a firearms malfunction of that magnitude. Anyhow, Stanley is going back to court this time on some firearms charges that he had improperly been storing. I think it's 7 firearms. So, he's going to do some time. Anyhow, I think that the real justice for Colton Bushey would be obviously for this guy to go to jail, but hopefully going forward, our big race problem here in Canada, more so than anything else, is how we treat our First Nations people. I think that getting rid of peremptory challenges would be a great step in the right direction for more justice for everyone. In terms of trials that are done by a judge and jury. In other weird news that's been out there, Patrick Brown. We talked about Patrick Brown on an episode recently. Former PC leader, kind of premier in waiting of Ontario. Turns out that he is in the running for the leadership of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, which, to quote one of my favorite lines from Hamilton, I wasn't aware that was something a person could do. Yeah, so he's back. He's in the race to take back his old job, which is an interesting decision on his part. I think it would be suicidal of that party to choose him to be the leader again. I don't think that they would win a general election against Kathleen Wynne on the basis of him, whether or not you want to consider the charges against him to be legitimate or based in fact. I tend to believe that they are, regardless of the shade that Patrick Brown is throwing, and we'll get to that in a second. For him to have these allegations hanging over him at this point in time, I just don't think in this time, in this Me Too age, I don't think you're going to win an election that way, buddy. So Patrick Brown has been saying, if these are for real, I invite you to go to the police. Which is either really stupid or really scummy on his part, as far as I'm concerned. These are, to my mind, credible allegations. Just simply because I don't think that the CTV, which is like kind of the more, we don't have a real Fox News here anymore since Sun News shut down. It's the more conservative option on the Canadian dial, though. I don't think CTV is going to print something damaging without it being true. Without them being confident that it's true, I should say. If it's going to damage Patrick Brown's chances of being premier. Furthermore, it's like I say, it's kind of a scummy thing for him to say, because it's just to at that point it just kicks up doubt in the public eye, and makes it more difficult for these women who have remained anonymous to heal. I think that honestly, if they want to go forward with charges, I would like to see them do it. But you know what? It's not really my place to say that they should or they shouldn't. And it's again, we've seen countless times that it's really hard to prove these charges in a court of law in terms of finding a person guilty of doing doing awful things, for them to be legally responsible for them. Even though they may have done them. I mean, like, hell, get back to the Colton Boushie thing. It's pretty clear to me that whether or not he meant to, Mr. Gerald Stanley killed Colton Boushie. And I don't think anybody disputes that a gun fired out of Stanley's hands and Boushie was struck and died. Unfortunately, Gerald Stanley is not found criminally responsible. I think he is responsible as hell. He's guilty as hell, but he was found not guilty in the court of law. I think that Patrick Brown probably did do some really, really awful, terrible, sketchy things. Whether or not he should have to go to prison for them is besides the point. But I mean, if I were a progressive conservative voter, I wouldn't want this toxic individual being the leader of my party. I'd have a hard time coming out to the polls to vote for him. That's for certain. So you know what? That's that on the increasingly weird situation that's going on with Patrick Brown in Ontario. Of course, like, Ontario's not that far off from a provincial vote, so we'll see what happens. They're going to elect the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party here soon, and we'll see who it is that's going to be running against Kathleen Wynne. There's some chance that it might be Rob Ford's brother Doug. I'm sure you remember Rob Ford if you're not a Canadian. He was Toronto's crack smoking mayor, who passed away from, I think it was stomach cancer a couple of years ago. So his brother Doug has thrown his hat into the ring. I don't like it. Don't care for Doug Ford being in politics and being anywhere near a position of real power. Makes me uncomfortable. Makes me anxious. And I don't care for it. And on that happy note, we're going to call that an episode. This show is produced by me with music from Mon Plaisir. You can check them out at loyaltyfreakmusic.com. You can follow the show on Facebook.com/The John Dulong Show. Email into the show at johndulong@gmail.com. And you can follow me on social media. You can find me at Jibberdy, Jiberdy. Make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes and Google Play. And if you could, rate and review, as that helps get more folks listening. Another great way to help out is to tell a friend about the show, get the word out, and of course, tune in every single Monday for your weekly dose of the Monday morning nonsense. Like I said, guys, next week we're definitely going to have a guest. I've got the interview all set up. It's going to happen on Tuesday. And if it doesn't happen on Tuesday, I don't know, maybe I'll interview a sock puppet or something. I'm going to have a guest on the show. It's going to happen. Promise you. Sick of not having guests. Anywho, I think that's about going to do it. Thank you so much for joining me. And for John Dulong, I'm John Dulong. And remember, I hate peer pressure, and you should too. Thanks. So I got to do some work in my chosen field, volunteer basis. It wasn't really work. I was witnessing a signing, but my instructor was there, and she had us explain the forms that were being signed to the client, and we're a day afterwards. So I'm recording this, and I'm still fucking giddy about it. It's absolutely wonderful, and I feel really great about it. It's excellent. Hey, if you're in a place that gets this Monday off, I hope you're enjoying it. I, for once, actually have family day off. I think it's Family Day here in Nova Scotia. Actually, this might be the one that's named after a different person every time. I think it might be like Heritage Day. And it was Viola Desmond Day one day. Look up Viola Desmond if you're not aware of who she is. She's kind of a badass. Anywho, if you're having a holiday, I hope you're having a good one. If you're not having a holiday, I hope you're having a good one. Okay, bye.